How would you say like technology has influenced the industry?
Technology for treatment planning is getting better. AI that's helping with the segmentation of models.
Is this the best way to treat? 3D printed aligners, is that a better way?
I think that's going to be the next big revolution.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Tom from ODL. Happy to have our fourth podcast, and today we're going to be discussing the difference between clear aligners. I'm here with TJ Wright, and we're going to go through all the ins and outs of clear aligners, the companies involved in them, and just kind of the nitty gritty of all of it. So TJ, great to have you again as usual. You having worked in an office for so long, I think your expertise is just second to none. So I just want to get into it here and talk about aligners. And I feel like with aligners, they can become really annoying because it's just so much talk all the time on it, and it's like people just get sick of it because it's so much. You worked with a couple of aligner companies. What are some of the main players in the clear aligner industry? Who are some people that you worked with, and what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really even have to say the biggest has always been Invisalign, but things seem to be changing. There's other players that have been in the market for a couple of years that are taking up a lot more of the aligner share. So we've got 3M Clarity has been, getting stronger and stronger every year, bringing on more and more docs. I think they're having a good year right now. We've got Spark, has been out for a few years. It started slow, but the last year they've really picked up a lot, and they've got some great people advertising for them in the community, in the orthodontic community. Then you've got other types of companies like SureSmile is similar to those guys too. SureSmile is also working a lot with general dentists in their practices. I think a lot of people that use Dentsply Sirona or like CEREC machines are getting deals on SureSmile and kind of getting locked in based on the equipment they have in their office. Then you've got companies like Candid that started out direct to consumer, but orthodontist owned. Candid is now focused more on going into GP offices and helping them to do more of the aligner cases, and referring less. And then, of course, the Purple Company, they're still doing DIY, but they are also going into offices and selling dentists on using their platform for patients. So those are the big, just private equity owned companies. And then you've got a lot of labs across the country that are doing aligners too, and have been doing aligners for years. I think historically labs have gotten a bad rap at doing aligners because they were always just compared against Invisalign. So it was Invisalign, and then maybe your lab could do, a few sets of trays at a lower cost. But that's changing as technology is becoming more available, and it's not just, you don't need big private equity money to deliver an excellent aligner anymore.
Yeah, that's 100% right. I think that was kind of the mindset that we were seeing, to where you almost had to. It's an add-on. A lab aligner is just an add-on to your whatever else you're doing. Oh, you do that? Oh, maybe I'll order a couple of aligners from you. But if you can at least match the technology that people are getting, then people are going to be willing to give it a try. And I think that's what people are seeing with the technology happening. What are like some of the most significant trends that you've seen over the past couple of years? Any changes that have really become larger?
Yeah, I think across the board, share of chair for aligners has grown in most practices. So doctors are prescribing aligners more than they were. still, majority fixed work in the industry, fixed appliances, but aligners are definitely growing. And I think the doctors that saw the benefit of using aligners during COVID when patients were at home, they really just leaned into it afterwards and realized they could grow their patient base without needing to bring on more doctors to see these patients for all their visits, so they can have a much better overhead percentage.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like I've heard of practices who are just like all liners, and I think it's been around a little bit. People who are
Yeah,
just doing only aligners, but definitely getting more popular, and just the revenue amounts that these doctors are able to achieve because they don't see people in office. Now, I know some laws I've seen in some states are now requiring an initial visit, which I think is good. I think you should have an initial visit. But if you are being seen by an orthodontist, okay, and it's not necessarily like a DIY company,
yeah,
um, talk about convenience. Like that's really convenient. Like
yeah,
I have kids and I don't want to have to drag my kids every 6 weeks if I don't have to. Now, fixed at the beginning of treatment, like that is a little bit of a different story. But if you can remotely do a lot of this stuff, I think that's a lot of the trends that are taking place in the industry and for the better. Because
yeah.
if you don't have to drive somewhere, awesome.
It improves the patient experience as long as the clinical outcomes, equal or better. Then there's no compromise.
100%. Um, what do you think are some of like the challenges that doctors are facing when choosing an aligner provider?
Yeah, I think that there's so much noise in the market right now. So I think doctors are getting bombarded by people, selling aligners, and
Yeah.
you can only hear so much. They have enough responsibilities to take care of their patient base and their office and their team. Um, if you have 8 people coming to pitch you for their aligners, it can get maybe be annoying. Navigating through all the noise to find the best fit is a challenge, and the differences seem to be pretty small between the companies. um, there's a lot of more similarities than there are differences, but to be able to highlight those differences and know how they're going to affect your practice are key.
Yeah, it's really going to be, I think, down to a lot of doctor preference. Whether it's your preference for pricing, preference for technology. Um, I feel like it's not like other orthodontic products because I hear different things from different orthodontists all the time, and there's just not something linear across the board that everyone feels like, hey, I can't stand this aligner company because of this. And then the next person will say, I can't stand it because of this. I think there's just a myriad of different reasons and challenges that people are facing when they have to choose an aligner provider, which makes people very comfortable with sticking with one aligner provider because um, it's easy, which
Yeah,
totally makes sense. So, but I think one of the other challenges is, you have so many vendors in the orthodontic area in our space. So when you have multiple people, you're making life a little bit harder that you have to deal with. So yeah, you might have instead of one salesperson stopping by, you have 4 or 5 on all the different products and that takes up your time because you're really wanting to spend time with patients, not with vendors if you don't need to. How would you say like technology has influenced the industry so far?
well, I think more and more offices are going digital, so it's more rare now that I talk to an office that doesn't have a scanner or doesn't have a plan for a scanner. I'd say that most orthodontic offices are scanning, and also it seems a lot of general offices are scanning too. So the technologies, become more available. There's more companies that are making scanners. You've got, Medit is growing, and there's a lot of great deals on Medit out there right now. Um, you got Prime Scan going into a lot of offices, and then they're selling the Prime Scan with the CEREC machines, and then a Sure Smile bundle in there with them. That's one way they're grabbing market share. Um, So scanning is easier. I think the technology for treatment planning is getting better across the board. There's AI that's helping with the segmentation of models so that a tech that's trained in moving teeth can spend more time moving teeth in less time prepping the scans so that the teeth are segmented from the gingiva so you can actually move them. It's just getting more efficient. I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is the remote monitoring and the use of remote monitoring across the board. Whether you're using system provided by your aligner company or dental monitoring or
Grin is another one.
Grin is the other one I'm thinking of. So there's a lot of options there, and it all helps with your ability to still give the patient the same level of care, but not having them travel to your office as frequently. Saving
Totally.
you time, saving them experience.
Yeah, I think I mean, as far as new technology in the aligner industry, I think those points in technology are all very, very valid. I think that what aligner companies do is a lot of times they repackage already used technology, whether it's, hey, I have a new material out, or this treatment planning software, is the next big thing. And then you use it, or you use the material and you're like, I'm getting the same result. So it's nice, but I'm just not seeing something that's actually revolutionary. And that's going to I think, be par for the course unless doctors want to think in that mode of hey, this is working. We're making money. The aligner company's making money. Everyone's making money. What can we do to kind of push the industry forward? So I've seen a lot of advancements, but I'm not seeing anything mind shattering or earth shattering that's changing in the industry. And I'd love to see more of that. More aligner companies spending money. Is this the best way to treat?
Yeah,
3D printed aligners, is that a better way, or is
I think that's going to be the next big revolution
yeah,
because of what the implications are in terms of being able to deliver different clinical results. Some people think that some of the aligner companies do directly 3D print their aligners, but as it is right now, no big aligner company 3D prints their trays. They 3D print the model and they thermoform a fixed thickness material onto that model and trim it out. But if you don't have to go by a fixed thickness, if you can make certain areas of the aligner thicker so you can affect the force on in the posterior, you can really change the way you're treating with a bidimensional aligner that's 3D printed and custom.
totally. And you could change the time that treatment actually takes place. I mean, if that's what I'd really love to see. Hey, treatment is typically 2 years or a year and a half, and because of the way we're treating, obviously there's only so fast teeth can move, but
Yeah.
we've cut that by 40% because of that. There's all that, the nighttime aligners and things like that. That's all marketing
Yeah.
because teeth can only move in a certain way, in a certain speed, safely. So, but I think there are ways to do it much more effectively. So yeah, there's definitely been technology. I would love to see much more. That's kind of my thought, my 2 cents on the industry. Not blown away by anything, but it's definitely cool. How important would you say that precision in the design and manufacture of clear aligners is?
I think it's critical. I mean, if you have any defect in the model print, that's going to affect the fit, and you're not going to get the same results you planned in your digital setup. Precision and consistency and quality is critical. It's
Yeah.
crucial.
And I think it goes back to the scan too.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about different scanning companies, no, everyone wants to say, well, why didn't it work? And oftentimes what we're seeing, with Vivid aligners is that if something wasn't perfect, you look at the scan and it's oh, we were missing the entire buccal region of, the first molar. And, we're letting people know, hey, you didn't capture that on the scan. So there's definitely user error that's still involved, and that's something to watch out for. Like, how do you avoid that user error to make sure we're not automated yet? Um, and I think that that's something that you really want to work with a partner that can ensure that, when things do go a little bit non-automated, as we would hope things to be, there's someone to tell you, hey, listen, like, I'm not just going to blindly make an aligner on this. There's human eyes looking at this to ensure
Yeah.
that even with AI coming up, maybe 3 or 4 years from now, AI will fix all that. But I think we got a couple years still until it's fully humanless. I hope it's never humanless. I think AI is just going to be a kind of add-on to humans.
Yeah.
But what role does quality control play in the production of clear aligners?
I think just ensuring that everything is operating correctly, especially as you work with companies that use machines that are producing high volumes. Traditionally, the way that Vivid used to be made was a biostar thermoforming on the 3D model, where that tech sees it. They see each one. Where now we have automation, you have trays moving through a machine and an automatic thermoformer. So the quality control team that we built before that checks each model coming out, and that's their job, is to make sure everything's coming out right. That's key, just to make sure the equipment's running properly, to make sure that nothing got messed up in the process. Because the last thing you want is a patient to open up a tray and it not to work. They're back at home.
That's what I've heard from different doctors. Like, I've used some of the large aligner companies, and I still feel like, like a little lip or like flash,
Yeah.
along the gingival margin, and it's like, you'd think you could automate that out to ensure that that doesn't happen. But because we're not making, widgets, and everyone's dentition is different, you have different gum lines that
Yeah.
produce different anomalies within the aligner. And so when you have like a human hand that can, even if the whole thing is automated, at the end still look at the aligner and make sure, because remember, it's not like a chapstick or a pen. Like, it's doing something clinically to your body. It's
Mm-hmm.
moving your teeth. So you want that to be a good experience. You don't want to rip up, your gums for the next 6 months just because, and
Yep.
then, you're telling someone, well, here's a little file,
Yeah, that's what we did. The office I worked at, we used the leading invisible aligner company, and they had automated the process of deburring, removing the little burrs at the edge at the gingival margin that are produced by the milling machines that cut the trays off the printed models. And they came up with a system that they put all the trays that were laser marked in this some sort of big machine bath with these little beads in it, and they'd run it through like this machine, and it would knock off most of the burrs and kind of smooth out the edges. I remember, some people were having an allergic reaction to the beads that they added. There were some issues there that they had to switch up. This was years and years ago, but you still would get rough edges. So, that's one thing we used that aligner, and we also used Vivid. But the Vivid, we'd never have issues with the edge being sharp, because there were real people there actually checking them and polishing them with a burr. And that's something that we still can do, even though we are automating in that trim process with the laser now.
Yeah. And I think the laser is pretty cool because the laser, makes sure that you don't have any of that.
Yeah, compared to a milling machine that just has a 5-axis burr,
Yeah.
your laser is going to give you a smooth edge, and then we still check it because rarely though it can be a little sharp, and we smooth it out.
I think with comfort, and like patient fit, that's why every single iteration of aligners that we've come out with, that Vivid's come out with, different materials. Like, I've worn it because
Mhm.
I don't want to put something in my mouth that's, might have a chemical reaction. I'm very, I'm a stickler about that. Because we get calls, you get calls all the time. Hey, are your aligners gluten free? Are they chemical free? Are they BPA free? And there's other things that maybe aren't like as studied as they need to be, and we, look into all of that before we want to put something into the market. But then just the comfort as well. Hey, like there's just this small little thing that's bothering me here, or this just felt like it was a little bit too much, movement. And I think that we need to change the parameters there. So like having obviously real humans, and of course patient data is really important too, what patients are saying, because I'm one case, but there's millions of other people who may have a different experience.
Mhm.
But when it comes to quality and what you're looking at, having a team that has used Vivid, like aligners on themselves to make sure that they work for us before that they go out to anyone else. And I know other aligner companies have obviously done that, but it's just something that goes to show that um, establishing an aligner brand takes a lot of time, and making sure that it's comfortable and it fits patients really well takes a lot of time. And it can't just be a lab offshoot. It has to be a well thought out like brand in its own. Um, and I think that's what a lot of companies are trying to establish. Um, Now, like, let's talk about materials in aligners. This is something that I have a little bit of a contention with, because I find that it can be a little funny, just the marketing side of it, but their impact and their effectiveness in patient comfort or patient results at the end. Like, what has been your experience or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference in materials that the single layer plastics, what we would use for retention versus like the more stiff, rigid plastics versus the more flexible, multi-layered plastics that have that interelastic core. So that's where you're going to see the biggest differences between those two. But once you have, one aligner material that is that multi-layer interelastic core, you compare it with another company's, the differences are pretty minor. These companies are trying to claim clinical significance, and that might be there, but mostly it's marketing. To convince the doctors that their material is the best because their graph shows that it's better than this other plastic. Um,
Yeah,
but
I love graphs when it comes to aligner materials, because if I'm a doctor, I don't know if I've ever bought like anything based on like a graph where it just shows three materials, and then it shows like the other material or the best material, that like the graph just goes higher and there's just a line and there's very little data on the X and Y axis. And now I'm sold. I'm going to buy it because my graph is it's got the highest line. It's so ridiculous, that I don't think people fall for it anymore. I think that they used to, and I think that maybe
yeah,
that's people aren't utilizing that. But I just think that a lot of the materials are so similar now, and they're becoming so advanced, and so many companies have access to those same material properties. Maybe not the exact same material, but there's a lot of material scientists out there
yeah,
making, like these types of plastics. And so, like what you're going to get from one aligner brand to the next, honestly, I could try and convince you that like Vivid has the best plastic in the world, but it's not just the plastic. Like there are a lot of plastics that are going to perform really well. It's the clinician, it's the scan, it's the manufacturing process, it's the how the patient is actually wearing them, if they are wearing them, the compliance.
it's
So
huge.
it's definitely a point that I think is funny, and it's an interesting selling point. I think it's important to be there, but I don't think it's the material that you're using. As long as it's safe, it's biocompatible,
Mhm.
um, and it has elastic properties that can move teeth. You're going to get the job done.
Yeah.
So really interesting stuff there. Let's go on to a little bit about pricing and affordability on aligners. This is another really fun topic to talk about, because I think this is where people get just sick and tired of different aligner companies. I mean, a lot of doctors, let's face it, they're making really good money. Okay, so I think that a lot of aligner companies are like, well, I can just then charge the doctor a ton of money because they're already doing really well. Now, that's to me not fair and just. You should be selling a well-priced product, that is high quality, that can be delivered on time every time. What degree should pricing impact a doctor's decision when choosing an aligner company?
I think it matters more now than before. Years past, you didn't have the same type of competition in the market that we see today. So, one of the benefits of the competition in the market is that it does drive down prices and it does help with innovation in these companies. So, I think that most of the aligner companies are budgeting a lot of their marketing budget into their aligner price because they have to, take some of that profit and put it back into their marketing. So there's usually more wiggle room with the bigger aligner companies that
Totally.
you can fight for. But then there's other companies that just are not going to, try to sell you on, an overpriced tray and are just focused on your experience and saving you money and getting you, clinically effective and, a high patient satisfaction product.
Yeah, there's a lot of doctors who will now, when a patient approaches them about, an aligner company, and they're like, well, I want this. And then the doctor's like, well, did you come here for the company, or did you come here for me because you saw all of my good reviews? Because a lot of aligner companies will market on these doctors' websites. And so like you could go to every doctor, let's say in New York City or Boston or Buffalo, New York, and you'd see, hey, this doctor offers this company's aligners. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get like a beautiful result. To me, that just means you offer the same product. So it really needs to be, I'm going to this clinician, I'm going to this orthodontist, this dentist, because I hear how good they are and I know what they can offer me. And they're also fair. They give me a good price. And so a lot of doctors now are saying to patients, who request a certain aligner product, well, hey, don't worry about it. Like, you're going to get the same exact thing. I'm going to give you an amazing result. Like you came here for me. And I think that comes down with like pricing and how it impacts, what they're charging patients, giving patients maybe a better price. Because some of these aligners are still like, if you're not like a top tier provider, they could still be like between $25 and $40 an aligner, which is like insanity, especially if you're at the higher end. And but if you have commercials during the Super Bowl, that costs a lot of money. And so the patients are going to pay for that at the end of the day.
The doctor's going to pay for it too.
Well, the doctor's going to pay for it. Yeah, exactly. So like, with other aligner brands, you don't have that because it's a niche brand. Like it doesn't need to be. I think we've created this complete idea that like one must go directly to the patient so that they're forced to tell the doctor, this is exactly what I want, which was a really smart marketing play. But I think that the market is now really aware of aligners and what they are.
I think that play was more towards getting the consumer to recognize that they can ask for a clear aligner versus traditional braces.
Totally.
Whereas I don't see that there's much consumer like understanding of the different aligner companies. It's almost like the situation with Kleenex and how, when someone asks for a tissue, sometimes people will say, can I have a Kleenex? But it may not be a Kleenex brand issue, but they don't care. It's just associated with that name. Or, the other good example is the Xerox machine. So people would ask for, make a Xerox instead of a copy.
Totally.
Now people say, I'm getting Invisalign, but, they don't care if it's that company or, another clear aligner brand. You still got a lot of consumers that say they're getting braces and they're getting clear aligners.
It's so funny because if you think about that with brackets, and imagine if the bracket companies did that. I don't know if you've ever saw this back in the day, but like you see like a big sticker. I was at the dentist the other day, and you see like the big sticker of the different aligner companies there. But if they had the different bracket companies on there, as if a patient would actually care. I care that I'm not getting brackets with lead in them. Okay, I want to make sure that my dentist and orthodontist are upstanding, clinicians, not doing anything like that. But otherwise, like if you feel like that's the bracket that's going to get me to where I need to be, I trust you. I know that you're going to get me to where I need to be because I've done my research to go to the right orthodontist to get me the right clinical result. So really, really funny, when it comes to pricing, because I think that if you're paying a super high price, you're paying for marketing. It's what you're paying for. You're not paying for a clinical result in that. You might be also paying for, obviously, like ease, because it's easy to do what I've always done. I agree with you that makes a lot of sense. But you'd be surprised how easy it is to, experiment with other aligner companies and kind of see like, wow, like, well, that wasn't that hard. But again, taking the first step of just like finding the time to try something else definitely can be a little bit of a hurdle. Um, can you discuss a little bit like the role of like volume discounts in bundling, in making like these really expensive orthodontic treatments, especially with aligners, more affordable?
Yeah, I think most companies do the tier system where the more you order per quarter or per month, the lower your fee is for the next quarter or month.
Okay.
It's a sales tactic that motivates the doctor to push a little more to get another aligner case that might have gone fixed, but they got to get to their number. So it kind of creates a game to get a better price for all their cases. I think there's other options in there. So you have companies that don't just do aligners. So there's options out there. There's companies that do brackets too, brackets and wires that are in the big players in the aligner field now. So I think they're offering volume discounts based on more than just clear aligner work, which I think is good because not every case should be clear aligners. I think there are cases out there that do require fixed treatment, and if you can still get rewarded by the orders that you do for brackets or lab appliances or wires towards your overall price, and I think that's good.
Totally. Is that how, and that's how people can maybe get like trapped into a program, like, and they won't want to switch because it's like, well, I'm in this program right now and I'm getting this amazing deal. The aligner companies are able to perpetuate how they're running their company, which of course for a lot of companies is be beholden to the shareholder, not technically necessarily the patient. Because it doesn't, some of these large companies, it does not benefit them to shorten treatment. Okay. Because if you shorten treatment, you're now selling less aligners and you are making less money. And then your shareholders are making less money. So if you truly think about it in that way, does every aligner company have the best, in mind for you? And I know from our perspective, it's like, just having a clinical perspective and looking at just, our values, it's, I want to make sure that you get from A to B in the fastest, most effective way possible that is fair from a price standpoint. And I think that a lot of places just don't have that kind of same sentiment in mind, and it's unfortunate. Um, how could clear aligner companies make their products more affordable, or and especially without compromising quality?
When direct printing of aligners becomes real, I mean, it's already real in the sense that there are companies that have FDA approved 3D printing of direct aligners, but I don't think that there's enough research out yet on how clinically effective it is. So if the research shows that some of these new technologies are as clinically effective or more clinically effective, that's going to reduce cost for manufacturers significantly because they're no longer going to need a thermoforming machine. They're no longer going to need to print the model. of the case. They can just print the tray itself, so materials are less. Maybe the technology to buy the 3D printer is more expensive. Overall, I think the manufacturer is going to have a lower overhead when that becomes the norm.
And they should be focused on passing on at least some of the value onto their clients, that they say not everything, not every efficiency. If you're making a liner for $1 in a liner and you're not passing on any of that to your clients, then do you really want to be working with a company like that?
If their value is in serving the shareholders, why would they ever do that? If they're publicly traded and their goal is to get as much for the product as possible, because they work for the shareholders
or the VC firm that they're owned by.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily always the shareholder. It could be private equity
that's running it.
Hey, like, I need an aligner that's doing this well. So just a lot of food for thought. And what is like the general process for onboarding with one of these companies? Is it all pretty similar? Typically through a sales rep, or?
Yeah, I think it's gotten easier. Like, a long time ago, and you had to get certified by the leading aligner provider, the manufacturer, take a course. I don't think most programs are requiring a course anymore. I think most companies have a lot of digital resources to help guide a new customer into their aligner system. I think it's more involved for clinicians that have not done much aligners or any aligners before. But most clinicians have done aligners and understand it. So onboarding is more just learning the logistics, learning the website and how to do the orders and how to, review the aligner setup, approve it or modify it. So it's more about learning the software than anything else. For clinical direction, I think it's important that the team you're onboarding, the manufacturer you're onboarding with, has an orthodontist run, digital setup team, and has orthodontic experience themselves, people that you're talking with. I think that makes it so much easier and smoother.
Totally.
If you're talking the same language.
You think it's important to have, you definitely should have orthodontists on staff. I think that's very common, though, to have orthodontists on staff. But if you don't, then there's probably, who are you going to run that by? If someone who's done thousands and thousands of cases in their life, should definitely be a part of your team. I know that was really important for us, at Vivid, to have a clinical team, not only orthodontists overlooking with oversight into the technicians team, but just high end. How do we treat? What is our treatment philosophy? Do we have our own treatment philosophy, or are we really, you want to give control back to the doctor? Because the doctor went to school, the orthodontist, you went to school for 11 years for a reason. Okay. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. And we want to make sure that, you were using your expertise, which is why we wanted to build a software, with the MyVivid portal, with Vivid Aligners, that gives full control back to the doctor. And so I think giving control back to the doctor, it's becoming very common with different aligner companies. But we wanted to have a dual kind of aspect here, where it's, the way I think about it is, do as much homework as you'd like, or do as little homework as you'd like. So if you want, an aligner company like Vivid to do the entire setup for you, run by an orthodontic team, have reviewed tens of thousands of cases, then, you can do that without having to do anything and just approve your case. But if you want to have that clinical control, we get the software on your computer, and then we let you make the little tiny tweaks that you want to make, or as big tweaks as you want. It's really just as much as you want to do. So when we say we give control back to the doctor, it's really kind of carte blanche. What control do you want?
But we're also not just throwing all the instruments at you and saying, here, you do it. It's offering it. Do you want to do it? You can do it. Or you can let us do it for you, and you can check it.
Totally. And we can train you, how to do it. So that I agree with you, because when you give it's like any large piece of software. Like, here's 100 tools. And then the doctor's like, well, how do I even use this? Like, I need some advice on like, what's best practice here? Because you don't know what you don't know. Even if you went to school for 11 years, it's not like you went to school and trained on this particular software, so especially if it's new. So that's really important for us. We know that. We're definitely cognizant of that to make sure that, you're aware, and we want to step in as much as you want us to. I think that's awesome. So this is really just like a rundown of all aligners. I think aligners are going to become, I think I saw like a study, I think it's over 20 billion, in the next 5 years. Like, so the market is huge. And I think a lot of the market is growing overseas, of course. And a lot of the US and Canadian market is kind of being, I don't want to say forgotten about, but pushed aside by the large aligner companies because they're focused overseas because there's a lot more market share that they can take there.
They're fighting each other over there. And
totally. So why give you a discount? Why give you, the doctor, a better price when, really in reality, they don't need to. So just full transparency, a lot of companies just don't feel like they need to, unless there's a true revolt from orthodontists, unless orthodontists really start realizing that like you have the control, like you own the patient. And so we just encourage orthodontists to kind of look at that. Like, you're going to get, if you got the same clinical result, if you have the same as good or maybe even better software, is the marketing in the aligner company, or is the patient coming to see you? And if they're coming to see you, they're going to trust everything you say, and they're going to do whatever you say. When I go to the doctor, if I need a hip replacement or a knee replacement, I am not asking for, this specific brand of knees on the market. I could care less. I just want to make sure that it works. When I need a pacemaker, I am not asking for, Ron's backyard pacemakers.
I'm going to ask, how many times have you done this surgery?
Yes, right. That's exactly it. So I think the same thing with aligner companies. Brilliant, genius how it was marketed. I agree. Like, get all the patients to ask for the specific thing, and then they'll come and ask you, and you'll be forced to offer it. But the market is completely changing, and patients don't care, especially Gen Z. They don't care. Especially when you're using like gimmicky names and like shortening your name and making it sound like kind of cringe. So just adding that in there just for a little fun. But I think that, great information, TJ. Thanks as always for coming on. It's just so cool how everything's changing, and I look forward to seeing how everything's going to change in the next few years. So thanks again, TJ.
Thanks, Tom. Nice talking to you.